Handle it yourself, Emma. Stop making everything so dramatic. They're just contractions. Those were the last words my husband said to me before he hung up. I was 38 weeks pregnant. Alone. And Toronto was in the middle of one of the worst ice storms the city had seen in years. Outside, freezing rain struck the windows like handfuls of gravel. Tree branches bowed under the weight of the ice. The roads were nearly empty. The weather alert on my phone had turned red hours earlier. And my contractions were coming every 7 minutes. Ryan knew all of that. He also knew I had been having lower back pain since the afternoon. He knew my doctor had told me not to ignore regular contractions because our son had already dropped lower than expected. But Ryan was 2 hours north of the city at a luxury resort celebrating his mother's 65th birthday. And apparently, that mattered more. I stood in our kitchen with one hand gripping the edge of the counter. My other hand still held the phone against my ear, even though the call had ended. For several seconds, I listened to the silence. Then another contraction hit, harder than the last. My knees almost buckled. That was the moment I stopped telling myself Ryan might be right. This wasn't anxiety. This wasn't Braxton Hicks. I was in labor. And my husband had just told me to handle it myself. My name is Emma Parker. I was 31 years old when this happened. I had been married to Ryan for 3 years. Before that night, if you had asked me whether my marriage was happy, I probably would have paused before answering. Not because Ryan was cruel every day. He wasn't. That would have made things easier to understand. Ryan could be charming. Thoughtful when he wanted to be. Funny. Ambitious. He remembered restaurant reservations and birthdays. He knew how I liked my coffee. He could walk into a room full of strangers and make them feel like he had been waiting all day to meet them. That was one of the first things I loved about him. I grew up in foster care. Not one home. Several. Some good. Some temporary. Some I prefer not to remember. By the time I turned 18, I had learned 2 things very well. How not to ask for too much. And how to make myself easy to keep around. Ryan seemed different from the people I had known growing up. At first, he wanted to know everything. Where I had lived. Why I always kept an overnight bag packed. Why I never liked closed bedroom doors. Why I cried the first Christmas his family gave me a stocking with my name embroidered on it. At the beginning, he listened. Or at least I thought he did. Ryan came from a completely different world. His mother, Diane Parker, had been a private school administrator before retiring. His father had died several years before we met. The Parker family valued appearances. Good schools. Good neighborhoods. Good jobs. Good manners. Everything polished. Everything appropriate. I was none of those things in Diane's eyes. She never openly called me unsuitable. She was too careful for that. Instead, she asked questions like, "Do you know anything about your biological parents? Oh? Have you ever considered how family history might affect children? Or? Ryan has always been accustomed to a certain kind of stability. At our second Christmas together, before Ryan and I married, I overheard Diane talking to her sister in the kitchen. She didn't know I was in the hallway. She's lovely, Diane said. But you know how children from those backgrounds can be. They carry chaos with them. I stood outside that kitchen holding a tray of empty glasses. I waited until they finished speaking. Then I walked in as if I had heard nothing. That became a habit. When Ryan's family said something that hurt me, I minimized it. When Ryan forgot to defend me, I told myself he hated conflict. When Diane excluded me from family plans, I said she needed time. When Ryan started spending more weekends away for work, I accepted his explanation. He was building his career. He was working hard for us. At least, that was the story I told myself. Ryan worked for a commercial law firm that handled development contracts, zoning disputes, and real estate transactions. For the last 4 years, one name mattered more to him than almost any other. Robert Hayes. Hayes Development Group. If you lived in Toronto, you knew the company even if you didn't know Robert. Their name appeared on construction sites, hospital wings, university buildings, waterfront developments, and charitable projects across the province. Ryan had never met Robert personally for more than a few minutes, but he talked about him constantly. Hayes Development was one of his firm's most valuable clients. Ryan desperately wanted to become the primary relationship partner on the account. He said that if he could build enough trust with Robert Hayes, partnership at his firm was almost guaranteed. He had attended industry dinners, hoping Robert would be there. He volunteered for committees where Hayes executives appeared. He memorized details about Robert's development portfolio. He even once changed our anniversary dinner because an industry reception had been added to his calendar and someone from Hayes Development might attend. I was disappointed. Ryan told me, "This is about our future, Emma." That phrase could justify almost anything. When I became pregnant, I thought our future was finally changing. The pregnancy wasn't easy. The first trimester was nausea. The second was exhaustion. By the third, I had back pain, swelling, insomnia, and a baby who seemed determined to use my ribs as furniture. Ryan was attentive at first. He came to appointments. He built the crib. He ordered books about fatherhood. But as the months passed, his attention drifted. His phone was always in his hand. Work dinners multiplied. Diane became increasingly involved. She had opinions about everything. The hospital. The baby name. Whether I should breastfeed. Whether I should return to work. The stroller. The nursery colors. Ryan usually responded with, "She's just excited." I started to feel like a guest in my own pregnancy. The weekend of Diane's birthday, Toronto weather forecasts had been warning about freezing rain for days. Her celebration was being held at a luxury resort north of the city. Private dining room. Spa reservations. 30 guests. Ryan had planned to stay overnight. I was not invited. Diane said the resort weekend was adults only. Apparently, being 8.5 months pregnant made me some different category of adult. Ryan packed Friday morning. I stood in the bedroom doorway watching him fold sweaters into an overnight bag. "I've been cramping since yesterday." He kept packing. "You said they weren't regular." "They weren't. But they're stronger today." He checked his phone. "Call the doctor if you're worried." "What if something happens tonight?" "Emma, you're not due for another 2 weeks. Babies don't always check the calendar." He sighed. That sound. Not fear. Not concern. Annoyance. "Do you want me to cancel Mom's birthday because you might go into labor?" The way he asked made the answer sound unreasonable. "No." "Then what are we arguing about?" "I'm not arguing." He zipped the bag. At the front door, Ryan kissed my forehead. "Call me if you actually need me." Actually. I remembered that word later. By 9:30 that night, I actually needed him. My contractions were 7 minutes apart. Then 6. I called Ryan. He answered after several rings. Music was playing behind him. People were laughing. I could hear glasses clinking. "Emma, I'm in the middle of dinner." "Ryan, I think I'm in labor." "You were saying that this morning." "They're regular now." "Did you call your doctor?" I tried the nurse line. "It keeps disconnecting." "Because of the storm?" "Yes." He exhaled sharply. "Emma, what do you want me to do?" "The highways are terrible. I want you to come home." There was silence. Then someone said something near him. I heard a woman laugh. Not Diane. Younger. Ryan answered her before returning to me. "Look, I'm not driving back through an ice storm because you're having contractions 2 weeks early. They're every 6 or 7 minutes. You always panic before you know what's happening." My chest tightened. "I'm not panicking. Handle it yourself, Emma." His voice went flat. "Stop making everything so dramatic. They're just contractions." Then he hung up. The next contraction forced me to bend over the kitchen counter. I breathed through it. When it passed, I called emergency services. The line connected. Then put me on hold. The storm had caused accidents everywhere. Power outages. Road closures. Emergency crews stretched thin. I waited. Another contraction came. Then another. My phone battery dropped to 9%. I called my closest friend, Lisa. Voicemail. She lived on the other side of the city and had a toddler. I left a message anyway. "Lisa, I think I'm in labor. Call me." I tried emergency services again. The call dropped. At that point, I did something that now seems reckless. But when you are alone and in pain, good decisions become smaller. You stop planning your whole future. You plan the next 5 minutes. I grabbed the hospital bag I had packed 3 weeks earlier. Put on boots. A coat. A scarf. My plan was to reach the sidewalk. Maybe a neighbor would see me. Maybe I could flag down a car. Maybe I could reach the main street where traffic was more likely. The front steps were covered in ice. I held the railing. 1 step. Then another. The freezing rain hit my face. I remember thinking how strange it was that the city looked beautiful. Streetlights reflected off every frozen surface. Everything glittered. Then a contraction came without warning. I tightened my grip. My boot slipped. I fell sideways. My shoulder hit first. Then my hip. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I lay on the icy landing with one hand over my stomach. Please, I whispered. I don't know whether I was talking to my baby, to God, to myself. My phone was still in my pocket. 4%. I tried emergency services again. The automated message began. Then the screen went black. The battery died. I remember the cold. That is what stays with me. Not pain. Cold. It came through the back of my coat. Through my gloves. Into my fingers. I tried to push myself up. My arm shook. Another contraction started. I closed my eyes. Then headlights swept across the front of the house. At first, I thought I imagined them. The vehicle stopped. A door opened. Someone shouted. I heard footsteps slipping against the ice. Then a man's voice. Ma'am? Can you hear me? I opened my eyes. An older man was crouching beside me. Gray hair. Dark wool coat. No hat. Rain collecting on his shoulders. He looked terrified. Not generally concerned. Terrified in a strangely personal way. What's your name? Emma. He froze for a fraction of a second. Emma what? Parker. Another contraction hit before I could say anything else. The man turned. Call ahead, tell them 38 weeks, active labor, fall on ice. Someone behind him answered. He took off his coat and wrapped it around me. You're going to be okay. I wanted to ask who he was. Instead, I said, me baby. We're getting both of you to the hospital. He stayed beside me in the SUV. I remember warm leather. The smell of wool. His hand under mine when the contractions came. At one point, I opened my eyes and found him staring at my face. Not inappropriately. Almost like he was trying to solve something. Have we met? I whispered. His expression changed. I don't think so. Then he asked, where did you grow up? The question made no sense. Everywhere. He looked confused. Foster homes. Something happened to his face. I was too exhausted to understand it. The rest is fragmented. Hospital lights. Nurses. A doctor asking questions. Someone telling me the baby's heartbeat was stable. Someone asking where my husband was. I said, not here. Then labor moved quickly. My son was born just before dawn. Healthy. Loud. Perfect. I remember hearing him cry. Then crying myself. Then, everything disappeared. When I woke, sunlight reflected off an ice-covered city. My body felt heavy. My first thought was my baby. He tried to sit up. A nurse immediately came closer. He's fine. Where is he? They'll bring him back in a few minutes. He's doing beautifully. I exhaled. Then I noticed the man sitting near the window. The man from the SUV. He stood. I'm sorry. I should probably have left. No. My voice was weak. You saved us. He shook his head. I was in the right place. He looked older in daylight. Mid-60s. Carefully dressed. Expensive watch. Not flashy. Controlled. But his eyes were red. My name is Robert Hayes. For a second, I thought my medication had affected my hearing. Robert Hayes? He gave a tired smile. Yes. I knew the name. Of course I did. Ryan had talked about Robert Hayes for years. I almost laughed at the absurdity. My husband would faint if he knew you were here. Robert's smile disappeared. Your husband wasn't with you. It wasn't a question. No. He sat down slowly. Emma, I need to ask you something strange. Okay. Do you know anything about your biological parents? Every muscle in my body seemed to tighten. No. Nothing? I entered foster care as a toddler. I have almost no records from before that. Robert looked toward the window. Then back at me. Did anyone ever tell you what name you were born with? I shook my head. Emma was always Emma. He swallowed. What's your birthday? I told him. He closed his eyes. Only for a second. Then he reached into his coat pocket and removed a small photograph. It was old. Creased at the corners. A woman standing beside a lake. Dark hair. Wide eyes. She was smiling. I stared at her. Something about the face made my chest tighten. Who is she? My wife. Was? She died 28 years ago. I looked back at the photograph. Robert sat down again. We had a daughter. My heart began beating faster. She was 3 when my wife died in a highway accident. There was confusion at the hospital. The records from that night were incomplete. Our daughter entered provincial care before I understood what had happened. That doesn't make sense. I know. You just lost a child? No. The word came quickly. I searched. His voice broke slightly. For years. He took a breath. There were administrative mistakes. A surname entered incorrectly. A temporary placement under incomplete information. Then a transfer. By the time I traced the first record, she had already been moved again. I stared at him. How long did you search? 28 years. The room seemed to tilt. Robert continued carefully. Several months ago, investigators working with archived provincial records found a file that might connect to my daughter. 4 days ago, they identified you as a possible match. I stopped breathing. You knew about me before last night? I knew your name. Then why were you on my street? I wasn't looking for you. He shook his head. I was coming back from a development site. We took side streets because of the highway closures. His eyes filled. When the driver stopped and I saw you on those steps. He stopped. I suddenly remembered. The way he said my name. Emma. Like it had hurt him. You think I'm your daughter? I think it's possible. I looked at the photograph again. The shape of the woman's eyebrows. Her mouth. I had spent my entire childhood imagining faces. Mother. Father. Grandparents. People who might have looked like me. Robert did not reach for me. That mattered. He didn't say he was my father. He didn't call me his daughter. He said, I would like to arrange a DNA test, but only if and when you want one. I started crying. Robert stayed where he was. Then the nurse brought my son into the room. Everything else disappeared. I held him against my chest. He opened his eyes. Dark. Serious. Perfect. Robert stood several feet away. He looked at the baby and covered his mouth for a second. Would you like to hold him? Robert looked at me. Are you sure? No. I laughed through tears. I'm not sure about anything. But I handed him my son. He held the baby like someone holding something breakable. His hands trembled. And that was the exact moment Ryan chose to walk through the door. 3 days had passed. 3 days. He had not returned the first night because the roads were still bad. The next day, he said Diane wasn't feeling well and he needed to make sure she got home safely. Then he said he had an urgent work call. By the time Ryan finally arrived, I had stopped asking when he was coming. He entered wearing a cashmere sweater and carrying flowers. His first words were, "Hey." Then he saw Robert. Ryan stopped. The flowers lowered slowly. Robert was sitting beside my bed holding our son. For almost 5 seconds, nobody spoke. Ryan looked at me. Then at Robert. Then back at me. Mr. Hayes. Robert turned. Ryan. Ryan's entire posture changed. I had seen him do it at professional events. Shoulders back. Voice smoother. Expression à l'air. The version of Ryan designed for important people. I didn't know you were here. Robert looked down at the baby. I gathered that. Ryan laughed nervously. What a coincidence. Nobody answered. He put the flowers on the table. Then he came to my bedside. For the first time in 3 days, he touched my face. Emma, I've been so worried. I looked at him. No, you haven't. His hand stopped. I called. Twice. Service was terrible. You sent one text. I was trying to get back. You drove back this morning. Ryan glanced toward Robert. I saw it happen. He was embarrassed. Not because he had abandoned me. Because Robert Hayes was hearing about it. Ryan lowered his voice. Can we talk about this later? I smiled without humor. You said that when I went into labor too. His jaw tightened. Robert looked at me. Then stood. I'm going to get coffee. He carefully handed the baby back to me. Ryan immediately stepped aside for him. Mr. Hayes, I've actually been hoping to speak with you about the harbor project. Robert stopped. He looked at Ryan. Then at me. Not today. He walked out. Ryan stared after him. Then he turned to me. What is Robert Hayes doing holding our baby? He saved my life. What? He found me outside the house. Ryan went still. What do you mean outside? I fell on the steps trying to get help. Why were you outside? I stared at him. Because my husband told me to handle labor myself. For once, Ryan had nothing to say. He eventually sat down. Emma, I'm sorry. I looked at my son. Are you? Yes. Would you be this sorry if Robert Hayes hadn't been sitting here? His face changed. That's unfair. No. It's a question. Of course I would. Then why did it take you 3 days to come? He rubbed his forehead. Mom's birthday became complicated. Complicated. The storm. Her blood pressure. The roads. And Claire? Ryan froze. I had not planned to say her name. I only knew Claire as one of Ryan's colleagues. He had mentioned her often. Too often lately. But during our phone call the night I went into labor, I had heard a woman laughing near him. At the hospital, Lisa had eventually returned my call. When she learned Ryan was still at the resort, she became furious. Then she said something strange. Wasn't Claire going to Diane's birthday? I asked why. Lisa assumed I knew. Ryan had brought Claire to a charity dinner the previous month, and introduced her to several family friends. He had said it was work-related. Lisa thought it was odd. Now Ryan was sitting beside my hospital bed looking like someone had opened a door he wanted to keep locked. What about Claire? He asked. You tell me. She's a colleague. Was she at your mother's birthday? Yes. Why? She knows Mom. How? Through me. I waited. Ryan stood. This is not the time. You're right. I looked down at our son. The time was 3 nights ago when I called you. He left the hospital room less than 15 minutes later. Not angry. Shaken. Robert returned with coffee. He did not ask what happened. He just said, "Are you all right?" No. I looked at him. But I think I'm getting closer. The DNA test happened the next morning. Not secretly. Not through lawyers. Not without permission. A nurse explained the process. Robert signed his consent. So did I. Then we waited. 3 days. Those 3 days were strange. Ryan sent messages constantly. Apologies. Questions about the baby. Requests to visit. He also kept asking about Robert. How long had I known him? Why was he still at the hospital? Had Robert said anything about Hayes' development? At first, the questions were subtle. Then less so. Ryan wrote. Is he talking about the harbor contract? Another message. Please don't discuss my work with him until I explain some things. I stared at that one for a long time. Why would Ryan care what I discussed with Robert? Unless there were things Robert should not know. The DNA results came on a Thursday afternoon. Robert was in the room when the doctor handed me the report. Probability of biological parentage. 99.99%. I read the number twice. Then a third time. Robert didn't move. I looked at him. You're my father. His face collapsed. Not dramatically. Quietly. His eyes filled. He nodded. Yes. For 31 years, I had wondered where I came from. And suddenly, the answer was sitting 6 feet away. I expected joy. Instead, I felt everything. Anger. Grief. Relief. Suspicion. Sadness for the childhood we never had. Robert seemed to understand. He did not ask me to call him Dad. He did not try to hug me. He said, I know I'm late. I started crying. So late. I know. Why didn't you find me? His eyes closed. I tried. That doesn't give me those years back. No. I needed someone. I know. There are apologies that defend themselves. And apologies that simply stand there and accept the damage. Robert did the second. I cannot change what happened to you, he said. But if you allow me, I would like to be here now. I looked at him. I don't know how to have a father. A small, broken smile crossed his face. I don't know how to suddenly have an adult daughter. For the first time, I laughed. Can we learn? I nodded. Slowly. Slowly. That became our agreement. Ryan did not know about the DNA result. Not yet. I wanted one thing in my life that was not immediately turned into part of his career. Meanwhile, Robert's presence at the hospital had created another problem. He had recognized Ryan professionally. Robert knew the firm. Knew Ryan's name. Knew that Ryan had been working on Hayes' development matters. And after hearing what happened the night I went into labor, Robert asked one of his executives to review several files. Not because I asked him to punish Ryan. I specifically told him not to. I don't want your company destroying him because he hurt me. Robert nodded. I understand. If Ryan has done something wrong at work, that's different. It is. But I don't want revenge dressed up as business. Robert studied me. You sound like your mother. That was the first time he mentioned her directly. I looked at him. What was she like? He smiled. Stubborn. I laughed. That's what you have? No. His smile softened. She was kind. Smarter than me. She hated unfairness. She could forgive almost anything except cruelty. I looked down at my son. Then maybe I got something from her after all. The review of Ryan's work began quietly. At the same time, I began reviewing my marriage. I went home with the baby 9 days after the storm. Ryan offered to come back. I told him not to. Lisa stayed with me the first 2 nights. Robert offered nurses, drivers, a larger apartment, anything I wanted. I said no to almost everything. I accepted a car seat he bought after discovering the one Ryan had chosen had terrible reviews. That became our first argument. You cannot solve 31 years by buying things. I know. Do you? No. He looked genuinely embarrassed. I'm learning. I kept the car seat. Ryan came to see the baby twice that first week. He behaved like a different man. Soft voice. Flowers. Food. Apologies. Once, he sat on the couch, holding our son, and cried. I missed his birth. Yes. I can't forgive myself. I watched him carefully. You seem to forgive yourself quickly at the resort. He looked down. I made a mistake. Which one? He frowned. What? Leaving me? Silence. Claire? His head came up. How much do you know? Enough. That was the answer I gave. The truth was, I knew very little. But Ryan's reaction gave me more. He eventually admitted the affair. 18 months. Not one night. Not a mistake. 18 months. Claire had attended Diane's birthday, not as a colleague. As Ryan's partner in a life I did not know existed. Diane knew. That part hurt differently. I had spent years trying to earn acceptance from a woman who had apparently been welcoming my husband's mistress at family events. How could your mother do that? Ryan rubbed his forehead. She thought our marriage was basically over. Did I know that? No. Interesting. Emma, you and I had been disconnected. So you ended the marriage privately without telling the wife. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Ryan became defensive. Our marriage changed. No. I looked at him. You changed long before that. He said nothing. Then he asked the question that had clearly been bothering him most. What is Robert Hayes to you? I held his gaze. He's the man who stopped when you didn't. Ryan's jaw tightened. I mean beyond that. I know what you mean. Why is he still calling you? Because he wants to. That doesn't make sense. Not everything is about business, Ryan. He stared at me. For a second, I almost told him. Then I decided not to. The next week, Robert called. His tone was different. Emma, I need to tell you something. What happened? My company's review found irregularities involving Ryan. I closed my eyes. How bad? Not catastrophic. But serious. What kind? Expenses that do not match project activity. Billing submitted through third parties. Several approvals that should not have been his to authorize. How much money? We're still calculating. Robert. Current estimate is approximately $93,000. I sat very still. 93,000. Yes. Did he steal it? I'm not going to use that word before the review is complete. What do you believe? Robert was quiet. I believe Ryan has been charging personal expenses through work structures connected to our account. Claire? Some travel overlaps with her. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Of course it did. The review continued for 2 more weeks. Ryan sensed something. His messages changed. Less emotional. More urgent. He asked whether Robert had said anything about his firm. Whether anyone from Hayes Development had contacted me. Whether I had shown Robert private messages between us. Then one evening, Ryan appeared at my door without warning. I opened it only halfway. You need to leave. Emma, please. The baby is sleeping. I need 5 minutes. You should have called. You wouldn't answer. I answered yesterday. Ryan looked exhausted. Hayes Development suspended 2 matters I was leading. I said nothing. My firm is reviewing my expenses. Still nothing. Did you do this? No. Did Robert? I don't control Robert. You know what I mean. Yes. I looked at him. And no, I did not ask him to investigate you. Ryan laughed bitterly. Convenient. What is? That suddenly the biggest client in my career is destroying me while hanging around my wife. I almost corrected him. Instead, I said, if there is nothing wrong in your files, the review will show that. His face changed. That's not how firms work. Then explain it. Some expenses were structured creatively. Creatively. Everybody does it. Did everybody take their affair partner on trips? Ryan went pale. How did you know that? I didn't. Not until then. Another door opened. Ryan, go home. This is my home. No. You cannot just decide that. You decided I could deliver our son alone. His mouth tightened. Stop using that night for everything. I stared at him. That night showed me everything. He looked away. Then he said, Robert Hayes is not your friend, Emma. Men like him do not help people for no reason. My anger disappeared. In its place came something colder. You really believe that, don't you? What? That every relationship is a transaction. Ryan looked confused. I opened the door a little wider. Good night. 3 days later, Ryan was formally summoned to a meeting at Hayes Development. He believed it concerned the account review. He was right. He just didn't know I would be there. Robert asked whether I wanted to attend. At first, I said no. Then I changed my mind. Not because I wanted to watch Ryan lose his job. I wanted to stop being the woman discussed in rooms she wasn't invited into. My whole life had been other people deciding things around me. Foster agencies. Families. Diane. Ryan. This time, if my marriage was being discussed, I wanted to be present. The meeting was held in a boardroom overlooking the lake. Ryan arrived in his best suit. I recognized it. He wore it to every major professional event. When I walked in, his face changed. Emma? I sat down. 2 attorneys were already in the room. Ryan looked toward the door. What are you doing here? I was invited. By who? The door opened. Robert entered. Ryan stood immediately. Mr. Hayes. Robert nodded. Ryan. Then Robert looked at me. Not theatrically. Not for effect. He simply said, my daughter asked to be present. Ryan stopped breathing. I watched the sentence reach him. My daughter. His eyes moved from Robert to me. Then back again. What? Robert sat at the head of the table. The relationship was confirmed recently. Ryan looked at me. You're my daughter. Robert repeated. Ryan sat down slowly. For the first time since I had known him, he looked completely unprepared. I understood something in that moment. He was not shocked because I had found my father. He was shocked because of who my father was. The calculation happened visibly. Robert Hayes. Hayes Development. The client Ryan had spent 4 years chasing. The man he believed could make his career. The man who had held our son in the hospital. My father. Ryan looked at me. Why didn't you tell me? I almost laughed. Interesting question. His face flushed. Robert opened a folder. This meeting is not about Emma's family history. His voice was calm. It is about your professional conduct. Ryan straightened. Of course. One of the attorneys explained the findings. $97,000 in questionable billing and expenses. Trips improperly connected to client work. Third-party charges. Approvals that should have been disclosed. Ryan interrupted several times. He called them administrative issues. Misclassification. Poor documentation. Nothing intentional. The attorney listened. Then placed copies of emails on the table. Ryan stopped talking. Robert said almost nothing. That made it worse. Ryan finally turned to me. You gave them access to private information. No. This is because of you. No. He pushed back his chair. Come on, Emma, you really expect me to believe none of this is connected? I looked at him. It's connected because you did it. His face tightened. If Robert hadn't found you, nobody would be digging through this. Maybe. I nodded. But he didn't invent the expenses. Ryan looked at Robert. Mr. Hayes, I have worked on your company's business for 4 years. Robert's expression did not change. And? I've delivered results. You have. I've been loyal to this account. Robert looked at the documents. That word means something different to me. Ryan glanced at me. The attorneys explained what would happen next. The account would be transferred away from Ryan. His firm had been notified. A formal internal investigation was underway. The questionable expenses would be referred for independent review. Nobody screamed. Nobody froze bank accounts. Nobody threatened him. Ryan simply watched his career begin to move away from him because of choices he had already made. That felt more real. And more final. When the business discussion ended, Ryan asked, "Can I speak to Emma alone?" Robert looked at me. "It's okay," I said. Everyone left except Ryan and me. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, "You're Robert Hayes' daughter." "Yes. All this time. I didn't know. Until the hospital." "Yes." Ryan laughed once. It sounded broken. "This is unbelievable." He walked toward the window. "You understand what this could have meant for us." There it was. Not what this meant for me. "For us? What do you mean?" He turned. "Your father owns one of the largest development groups in the country." "I know. We could have." He stopped. I waited. "What, Ryan?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "You know what I mean." "Yes. I did. And that was exactly the problem." Ryan looked at me. "Emma, what happened between us doesn't have to destroy everything." I said nothing. "I made terrible choices." "Yes. But we have a son." "Yes. We were happy once." "Yes. I can fix this." That was the first time I almost felt sorry for him. Because I think Ryan believed it. He believed life was a negotiation. That enough words, enough charm, enough regret could reset the terms. He stepped closer. I was scared. Of what? Of being trapped in a marriage that wasn't working. "So you had an affair." "I handled it badly. You abandoned me in labor. I thought you were overreacting." I fell on an icy staircase. His face tightened. "I know." "No." I shook my head. "You know the fact. You don't know what it felt like." I could feel my voice trembling. I was lying outside our house wondering whether my baby was going to die because I couldn't get help. Ryan looked down. "I called you because you were my husband." Silence. "And you told me to handle it myself." He closed his eyes. "Emma? Then handle this yourself, Ryan." His eyes opened. I heard his own words in my head. Flat. Dismissive. Cold. I gave them back to him. "And don't make this into something dramatic." Ryan stopped moving. For several seconds, he simply stared at me. The callback was not satisfying in the way revenge stories make these moments sound. I did not feel powerful. I felt tired. But I also felt finished. "I filed for divorce this morning." Ryan's face lost color. "What?" "My attorney will contact yours." "Emma, please. I'm not keeping our son from you." He looked surprised. "You're not?" "No. Because this is not about revenge." I paused. "But trust will have to be rebuilt before I agree to anything beyond supervised visits." "You think I would hurt my own child?" "I think you left him before he was born." That silenced him. I stood. At the door, Ryan said, "Did Robert put you up to this?" I looked back. "No. That was important. Robert didn't save me from you." I opened the door. "You showed me who you were before I even knew Robert existed." I walked out. The months that followed were not dramatic. They were exhausting. Ryan's firm terminated him after the internal review concluded that the billing irregularities had been deliberate. The financial consequences were serious. Some expenses had to be repaid. Professional disciplinary proceedings followed. Claire disappeared from his life quickly. I learned that from Lisa. Not because I asked. Apparently, Claire had been interested in Ryan when he was ambitious, connected, and moving upward. Once the investigation became known, that relationship became much less romantic. Diane contacted me several times. At first, her messages were angry. Then defensive. Then emotional. Finally, she asked to visit her grandson. I agreed. Not immediately. And not without conditions. The first time Diane came to my apartment, she brought 3 expensive gifts. I left them by the door. "You don't need to buy access to him." Her face tightened. "That's not what I'm doing." "Good." She sat in my living room holding her grandson. At first, neither of us spoke. Then Diane said, "I handled everything badly." I looked at her. "That's a small sentence for a very large thing." She nodded. "I knew about Claire." "Yes. I thought your marriage was over." "Ryan told you that?" "Yes. Did you ever ask me?" Diane looked down. "No. That was the problem." She began crying. I did not comfort her. I also did not throw her out. Boundaries were new for me. I was learning that kindness and access are not the same thing. Robert and I learned each other slowly. He did not move me into a mansion. He did not rewrite his will in front of me. He did not suddenly become the father I should have had 31 years earlier. We had dinner most Sundays. Sometimes at his house. Sometimes at mine. Sometimes in ordinary restaurants where nobody cared who he was. He told me about my mother. Her name was Anna. She loved terrible detective novels. She hated olives. She sang when she cooked. She had wanted 3 children. Robert showed me photographs. For the first time in my life, I saw pictures of myself in another face. That was worth more than anything else he could have given me. He also told me the parts that hurt. How the accident happened. How the early search failed. How he spent years blaming himself. How eventually people around him began telling him to accept that his daughter was probably gone. He never did. I stopped talking about it, he told me. But I never stopped looking. I wanted to be angry with him forever. Some days, I was. Other days, I watched him hold Rowan and saw a man grieving 2 generations at once. Misson's name is Rowan. I chose it before the storm. Before Robert. Before everything changed. Rowan was 6 months old when Robert first got him to laugh by making ridiculous clicking sounds with his tongue. I watched from the kitchen. Robert looked up at me like he had just won an award. He likes me. He likes ceiling fans too. Robert frowned. That seems unnecessary. I laughed. Those small moments did more for us than any dramatic reunion could have. Robert eventually invited me to help with the Hayes Foundation. At first, I refused. Later, I learned that part of its work focused on children aging out of foster care. That mattered to me. I knew what 18 felt like when everyone expected you to suddenly become an adult because the paperwork said so. I knew what it meant to have nowhere to go for Thanksgiving. I knew what it meant to keep a bag packed. Eventually, I agreed to help with one program. The first time I spoke to a group of young adults there, I told them something I wish someone had told me. Being used to surviving does not mean you have to spend your whole life in survival mode. I didn't realize until I said it that I was talking to myself too. Ryan saw Rowan regularly. At first, visits were supervised. Later, as he became more consistent, we adjusted. He was not a monster. That mattered too. He was a man who had made selfish, dishonest, damaging choices. He loved our son. Eventually, I believed that. But loving someone does not erase what you do to them. Ryan apologized many times. Some apologies were defensive. Some focused more on what he had lost. Then one day, about 7 months after the storm, he surprised me. We were exchanging Rowan after a visit. Ryan buckled the baby into the car seat. Then he stood beside my car. I understand something now. I waited. The night you called me. He looked down. I keep wanting to explain why I thought you were exaggerating. I said nothing. But it doesn't matter. That made me look at him. He continued. You said you needed me. His voice cracked slightly. And I decided something else was more important. For once, there was no excuse after the apology. I nodded. Yes. I'm sorry. This time, I believed he understood what he was apologizing for. It did not change our divorce. It did not restore the marriage. But it gave me something I hadn't expected. Closure. Diane became a cautious part of Rowan's life. She learned to ask instead of assume. Sometimes she failed. Then I reminded her. She usually corrected herself. Robert remained careful with me. Sometimes too careful. He once asked whether he needed permission to buy Rowan a winter coat. I stared at him. You can buy your grandson a coat. I'm trying not to overstep. You're buying clothing, Robert, not changing his surname. He smiled. Progress. A year after the storm, Toronto had another night of freezing rain. Not as severe. Still enough to coat the sidewalks. I stood by the apartment window holding Rowan. He was almost asleep. The city lights blurred through the glass. I thought about the night he was born. The kitchen counter. The phone. Ryan's voice. Handle it yourself. I remembered lying on the ice and thinking I had no one. I was wrong. A stranger stopped. Then the stranger became my father. But that is not the lesson I took from that night. The lesson was not that someone powerful came and rescued me. It was that the person I had built my life around showed me exactly where I stood when I needed him most. And for once, I believed the evidence. For years, I had been trained by my childhood to accept small disappointments. To be grateful, people stayed at all. To excuse things because losing someone felt worse than being hurt by them. That night changed that. People sometimes ask whether I feel lucky because Robert Hayes turned out to be my father. I do. But not because of his money. Not because of his company. Not because Ryan spent years trying to impress him. I feel lucky because I finally know where I came from. I have photographs of my mother now. I have stories. I have someone who remembers my first 3 years even though I do not. And Rowan has a grandfather who shows up every Sunday with far too many books. But even if Robert had been an ordinary man driving an ordinary car, the truth about Ryan would have been the same. He left me alone when I needed him. That is what ended our marriage. Not Robert. Not Hayes' development. Not the affair. Not the investigation. Those things only revealed what had already broken. The night Ryan told me to handle labor myself, I thought I was losing everything. My marriage. My safety. Maybe even my baby. I did not know that before the storm cleared, I would meet the father I had spent 31 years without. And I would finally see the husband I had spent 3 years making excuses for. Some people do not abandon you when they walk out the door. They abandon you the moment you ask them to stay and they decide you are not worth turning around for. And sometimes that painful moment becomes the first honest thing they have given you. If you were in Emma's place, what would have hurt you most? Ryan refusing to come home while she was in labor? Discovering his affair? Or learning that Diane knew and stayed silent? Tell me what you think in the comments. If this story stayed with you, please like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Stories for more emotional stories about family, betrayal, difficult choices, and the truths people hide from those closest to them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.